Exhausted and hauling rad waste, Ensign Alexander Buchanan's crew encounters a mysterious group with alien mounts and a cryptic language. As whispers invade their minds, they realize this is no ordinary threat. The fate of their ship and humanity hangs in the balance. Ensign Alexander Buchanan yawned in his mask. He was coming up on 36 hours in his shift and was looking forward to being able to crawl into his bed and be dead to the universe for the next 2 weeks. Surely you're not bored already. Why, feels like we hardly even got started, Alex tried his best to glare at the lieutenant, but the effect was rather ruined first of all by both men's suits having face-obscuring masks, and secondly the fact that Alex knew his boss's mask hid a giant grin. He tried to respond but ended up yawning. Honestly, his brain felt like it was made of molasses trying to force its way through cobwebs. Oh, leave the kid alone, Buick. He's been up with you during this entire emergency repair, just as long as you have. Cobalt's helmet turned with his head. Let him get a bit of a nap while he can. By the time Velvet gets back to the bow sarcophagus and back to the plant, we'll be hitting nearly 40 hours on shift, if it weren't for the chain of custody issues and the fact that you two signed waivers. They would have dragged you 2 workaholics out of there nearly a day ago. You mean us 7 workaholics? Bunnies are subject to the same work limits and labor laws as us humans. That was the agreement. No more of you little guys working yourself to death because you don't like putting down a job, and in return you get the same, equal rights as everyone else. Alex nodded in agreement with Buick, though his nod quickly lost speed and just became a forward and backward in time with Velvet driving the sporklift over expansion gaps in the path. You were offered the same waivers as the rest of us, and you signed them, which also means as part of these waivers and for being paid a giant pile of ship's credit, you also need to take the next couple weeks off. But, boss, whatever will we do? Cobalt whined before his visor displayed an emoji to show he was just joking. It was something his and Cyan's smooth security visors could do that the engineering masks covered in armored cameras couldn't. Normally he'd have his visor open, or at least transparent, but part of doing rad work was keeping sealed until the job was done, and no one wanted the world to see what they looked like after over a day of working inside their own farts. Your case, probably go do more drills. In my case, there's some new green run distilleries and breweries on I-7 I'm going to tour. Cyan called from the back of the sporklift, where he was making sure Jet and Amarillo didn't fall off in their sleep. Of the 7 figures, Alex and Kennedy Equid, a.k.a. Blame My Parents, a.k.a. Buick, were the only 2 humans riding the multi-gravitational capable cargo loader hauler, a.k.a. Space Forklift Truck, a.k.a. Sporklift. The rest were Lunar R4 Cyberbiological, drones, a.k.a. Lunar Rabbits, a.k.a. Bunny Bots. The awake members gossiped the entire way in between bouts of dozing off. Only Velvet was clearly wide awake. Partly because as a purple caste, piloting and paperwork was the joke. It wasn't in her nature to fall asleep at the wheel even when traveling at a sedate 10 kph. Partly because she'd had several chances to catch breaks and sleep in between picking up equipment and taking previous loads to the sarcophagus earlier. All 7 had been working long hours cleaning up and replacing a broken reactor coolant pipe. Jet and Amarillo as yellow cast engineers had been doing most of the hard work, assisted by Alex and Buick. As blue cast security workers, Cyan and Cobalt had been working security and radiation containment. The only reason the 2 blues and 2 humans were even halfway awake was because they'd been taking turns driving and sleeping in Velvet's sporklift cabin. The blue as the security detachment, and the human as the junior officer responsible for the chain of custody from power plant to reclamation and shielding at the font of the Eostre. This last load in the sporklift bed and the trailer behind it was just low-grade waste made of the tarps used to contain any contamination, the tools used, the outerwear the crew had worn over their still-sealed vacuum-rated work suits, and drums of water that had been used to wash up the last of the mess the previously molten salts had made. The cases of crates, tools, and outerwear would likely sit on a shelf for a few decades before being recycled. The water would be added to the outer shielding of the Eostre to replace the continuous ablation from high-energy particles. It wasn't the first time work like this had been done on the Eostre. It wouldn't be the last. So there was a guide for standard work and risk mitigation, which also included security clearing a path. Not a problem. Island 04 was one of 2 heavy industry sectors in Eostre and had no actual permanent residents. Between the work on the reactor and the fact that there was no major work that couldn't be paused or offloaded to another sector, Island 04 was practically a ghost town. The sporklift's path had been programmed to have a minimum distance of 1 kilometer between them and anyone else in Island 04's Central Park. Or at least there shouldn't have been. Who are those people? Velvet asked as she slowed the sporklift to a halt. The park at the center of Island 04 was arid by design, serving as a small nature preserve for plants and small animals that enjoyed things on the warm and dry side. However, it was still a park and was festooned with several large artificial boulders that broke up sightlines. They also acted as everything from entrances and exits to public restrooms to tastefully hidden eateries. The problem was twofold. First, someone was ignoring safety and hazard updates. Second, the new group was blocking the road. Even in the lower gravity of Island 04's park, the sporklift was heavy enough to damage the park if it left the concrete road. Velvet smacked the dashboard in frustration. This is absurd. We're a rad waste transport. There's no higher right-of-way short of emergency response. Alex snickered. That would be the thing a pilot bunny would complain about. Still, he had to agree something was wrong. My ping isn't getting any IDs, sir. None? Buck rumbled. Nada. No maker RFIDs in any of that gear, or those mounts. You'd think they would want to advertise. Even weirder, no IID on any of them. Everyone paused at that news. Everyone aboard the Eostre had implant IDs. Even the skitters had a form of IIDs. As far as anyone knew, there was only one way for someone on the Eostre to not have an IID. Cobalt, cyan, link up with security. The sporklift rocked gently as Buick opened the door and hopped out. Not much. It was a heavy vehicle with a heavy load, but enough to finally stir Jet in the back. Why'd we stop? We're not in the spine yet, the engineer muttered. Can still feel gravity. You. 2 lovebirds get up and in the cabin. We're strapped down, sealed up, and our tanks are full. A little vacuum isn't going to hurt us. Jet groaned, but started to wake up Amarillo anyways. Yeah, vacuum won't hurt you, but sleepers might. The word sleeper was like a magical incantation breathing life into Amarillo. One moment she was groggily resisting being woken up. The next she was scrambling to look over the sporklift cabin while her right hand reached for a holster that wasn't there. Thought that would wake you up. Ama, you and Jet get in the cab. Security, you 2 coming up with anything? Negative results, both Blue Rabbits replied in unison. Security's devoting fresh resources to it, but they've never seen anything like this group. Cyan, you're with the LARP groups? You get anything? They look like they could be elves, queried the crystal cultists, wood assholes, and fungus farmers with security requests. No hits on any of their systems, Cyan reported as he hopped down while Velvet mumbled about dwarf players. If we had a few minutes to wait, I'd let the social stacks blow up just to make sure it's not someone's top-secret project. None of the DMs allow those after the noodle incident, but there's a certain kind of person who never stops trying. Right. Ensign. Security's probably already lighting up the bridge, but I want you to escalate directly. Cyan, you're with me. Do we have to, sir? The rabbit asked as he followed along. He had to hurry up since the big man's strides were each worth nearly 2 of his. Your security, you know the regulations better than I do we? Cyan let out a long, pained groan. Yes, they did. It was the tripwire protocol and it had to be followed no matter what. Until a sleeper agent's own actions or a security investigation proved they were actually hostile to the Eostre, they had to be given the benefit of the doubt. In the aftermath of the Venus Mutiny, it was one of the few things that had kept the Eostre from tearing itself apart. Cyan made sure his suit systems were recording and uploading to the security servers. This was absolutely going to generate an investigation no matter which way this worked out. Since he wasn't going to get his wish of sleeping for 2 days, then spending an extended break repeatedly getting drunk as fuck, the security rabbit focused on his job. He quickly marked and counted all the invaders, 48 total. 22 were on strange, bird-like mounts. Another 6 rode on strange beetle creatures. 3 seemed to be piloting the creatures. 2 more seemed to work mounted weapons on the beetles, and the last beetle rider seemed to be sitting in some sort of throne. The rest were on foot. Sir, have you ever seen anything like those, mounts? I wonder who made them. I do not like snake ostrich. It is mean. Buick joked, though it seemed to be about the best way to describe the tall mounts. It moved a lot like the ostriches in Island Aero 9's zoo, but it had no beak, and the areas with less feathers seemed to have scales, making it look like a fathered serpent walking on a pair of massive drumsticks. Nope. Haven't heard a thing on the maintenance or robotic channels. No one's been asking how to make mechanical ostriches or, giant beetles. We sure those birds weren't someone's gene editing project? The screams from biological code compliance would be heard all the way back in Saul if they caught anyone making livestock that big. And those giant beetle things are like nothing in any gene database I've ever seen. Granted, you'd want to ask a green to be sure. I'm a security guard, not a biologist, but I'm pretty sure BCC would pin a medal on the chest for advances to life sciences of whoever made those, then have the idiot shot and thrown in the recyclers. More soul tech then. What about the people? The riders all look well fed, but a lot of those foot soldiers look like they've only seen a decent meal in their dreams. Not sure I like any sleeper from a habitat with a caste system like that. I'm on better footing when I say no data. There's no social media accounts of any transhumanists with that appearance, no bolos in any security database. Sir, I cannot understate the stir the footage we're updating onto the A network is causing right now. Security is shitting its suit as we speak. Buick thought for a moment, then nodded. Everything seemed to just create more questions. Right, nothing for it. Ready to get shot to prove these idiots are hostile as they monologue about how they're the new masters of the Aostri and we'll all bow down to them? Ready? No. Resigned, yes. Well, we've done our part alerting the bridge. It's now with any luck we can just ask them to step aside and let us through, and it will be someone else's problem. After all, who would want rad waste? The pair walked the rest of the way, in silence, wondering why they had to deal with this mess, and wondering if these strangers would actually want to steal rad waste. Buick wasn't exactly sure where to begin, but thankfully the stowaways made the first move as those on foot parted and let forward a beetle rider. Someone went swimming in high fantasy waters and thought drowning was more fun than coming back to the real world. The lieutenant thought as he looked at the person sitting on top of the throne that was strapped to the back of the beetle. Ash, gray skin, black and purple plastic armor made to look like chitin from a giant beetle, much like they were wearing. Red hair that lifted and flowed against the wind. Yeah, bet you think you're some big bad elf warrior with your pointy ears and some gravitic generator just for the wild hair look. The rider on the front of the beetle, actually guiding it, leaned forward in what Buick first thought was a form of a bow until the one in the throne put its feet in the beetle rider's back. Ligrana 19D. Percenter Buick looked at Cyan, who just shook his head. No known linguistic base. Sending it to security. Fancy. Got their own language, Buick muttered. Hey, apologies, but you're kind of in the way of our shipment and the one. In the beetle throne spoke again, and it was just as incomprehensible. Though this time Buick thought he heard something of a whisper. Ours. Possess. Cyan stepped forward to give it a try. Sir, ma'am, both or neither. I'm sorry, but we need you to move your entourage. We assure you a welcoming party will be here shortly to properly welcome you to the Yostra. Another spoken line of gibberish. Then that voice, all ours, all of it. What the hell was that? Buick shook his head as the whisper seemed to bounce around inside his skull. You hear it too, sir? That is concerning. I can assure you it's not coming from the network. Look, this here, you don't want it. We're just workers trying to finish a job. If you'll just make room and let us pass. These no longer amuse us. Remove them. Buick was still trying to piece together what was going on. Between the strangers, the fatigue and the voices in his head, he only noticed the soldier advancing moments before sword was shoved through his gut and out the back. Suit punctures detected, releasing suit sealant, notifying medical services. Authors. Notes. Hello, HFY. My first post here. My first actual post on Reddit, I think. I've been enjoying cruising HFY for a while and getting daily doses of delicious stories to keep me sane at work from such series as First Contact and Not Gate. I've had some ideas boiling about in my head for years, and I felt I'd finally try to write some of them down to help keep me occupied during work and to give back to the community. Comments and criticisms welcome. You don't have to be gentle, but I would appreciate anything constructive. And yes, I do plan on explaining and expanding the world and a lot of the terminology I used. Edit. Formatting should be fixed, now with new and improved line breaks to make content actually readable. Now start next story. Entley walked the halls of the ancient artifact, humming quietly to herself. She was an Enkar, quiet and antisocial for her species, which didn't mean she disliked the company of others. It was more that she was quite comfortable alone for long periods of time. Unlike the rest of her species, which were often compared to terror otters, Entley could go days without saying anything as long as she had her implant playing music or her favorite casts. Entley knew what otters were, thanks to the terraforming works of the ancient and terrible builders. The creatures were all over Confederate space. She agreed the things were adorable and playful little terrors, especially if you had treats. In millennia since the terror extinction event, many Enkar worlds had imported otters, and they lived side by side with the aquatic mammals in happy, if sometimes exasperated, peace. Anyways, Entley's disposition made her a prime candidate for the care of the terror artifact. At first, she had been nervous about being assigned to the maintenance and cleaning crew aboard the bronze cog, but she'd quickly grown to love the work. The cog had originally been intended to be the seed ship for a terror pleasure and role-playing world. Even during the savage series of wars leading up to the TXE, the Terror had lived up to their other name of the Builders, and had been planning to settle a fresh pleasure world in the long dark between the Confederacy and the recently absorbed United Council. Only the Shade Knight struck, killing the crew, the initial players, and heavily damaging the ship, which left only basic automation systems. Automation systems that had spent thousands of years rebuilding themselves bit by bit, doing a bit of work, then suffering a power or systems failure that would take decades to recover from before they could do the next bit of work. There were systems to rebuild, shades to clear, and a startling lack of mass to work with besides cannibalizing its own system. Finally, 39.5 millennia after it had set out, the bronze cog had repaired itself to make the FTL translation into the system that had been chosen for it to set up its world, only to find the formerly untouched system was now quite happily colonized by sentient beings who were understandably having a bit of a panic at a previously unknown terror artifact just showing up. Such artifacts tended to be powerful and more than a bit grumpy. The bronze cog was indeed powerful, but it had shocked everyone by being polite. It simply explained its story before asking what would be a comfortable parking orbit around the Fieshyard system. After a few years, it had then politely asked if it could hire some caretakers to help maintain it as it sat in semi-slumber. It couldn't offer much, mainly due to its own programming, but it could share stories and a tiny trickle of technology. Not to mention act as a research and tourism destination for others in the former UCE parts of the Confederacy, as long as they were respectful. Fieshyard was a comfortable G-class star with a lovely world almost perfectly in the green zone for the primarily Enkar, Tukna-Arn, and Lankatalan populations that called it home. It had a handful of inner rocky planets, 2 massive giants, and even a captured brown dwarf star, Fieshyard B, on an orbit that would be stable for many millions of years more. Both the two giants and the dwarf had their own life-bearing satellites, bringing the system to have one prime life-bearing world and 3 smaller secondary worlds. In the ancient times of the United Civilized Council, Fischyad, FY3, would have been a prime world for aquatic tourism and industry. Instead of having a single, unknowingly dweller-spawn-crafted mega-continent, it was covered by massive archipelagos and small continents. The 3 smaller worlds, Aurora Bay, FYAV, Glistening Glaciers, FY7, and Twilight Harbor, FYBI, would have been ignored or used as punishment outposts for whatever UCE Corporation could find a way to extract some profit out of them. But the Terrors had been willing to set up home on any rock they could stand one-footed on. Why should others limit themselves to only the nice world, which is why the 3 minor planets now had their own semi-primitivism communities on them? People who lived, worked, studied, and made their happy lives on the 3 frosty planets, Entley, was from Twilight Harbor. In fact, most of the Enkar aboard the cog were from the same planet. Part of it was convenience as the artifact orbited Fischyad B. The larger part was that there was just something about the Twilight Harbor Enkar. That made it so they got along exceptionally well with the primary intelligence of the bronze cog. They were quite happy working in the dim hallways, cleaning and fixing things. The darkness didn't really scare them, and they were more comfortable working long stints of solitude aboard the massive artifact. After nearly 40 minutes of walking, Entley reached her destination. She knocked a few times on the door of a drop pod and stood back as it opened. Inside was a Terra figure in overalls over an environmental suit. The figure's boot sequence was still running on the large dark visor that covered the front of the figure's helmet, but Entley knew the figure could hear her already. "Hello, Pioneer 1829. She waved at the figure and giggled when it waved back. The giggling became a sigh when the figure's arm seized up. Don't worry about that arm anymore. I was sent down here to bring you a new one, as well as a fresh set of overalls to replace your old ones, and new batteries for your build." "Tool!" She smiled as she gently pushed her cart towards the sitting figure with the items and a steaming carafe of caf on it. The pioneers never drank any, but they seemed to appreciate having the ability to pantomime drinking a mug of the classic stimulant. "I'll be around the corner to give you room to freshen yourself up." Entley smiled as she waved goodbye. 1829, who gave a thumbs up back before pulling itself out of its crash couch with an audible series of creaks. Entley would probably be waiting most of an hour for the Pioneer to perform maintenance on itself. So she made herself comfortable leaning against the wall between 2 engineer capsules as she grabbed one of her playlists and shuffled it. She also took a stick of fish jerky out of one of her many pockets and peeled the wrapper away before starting to nibble on it. One of the engineer capsules across the way flashed the picture of a terror fish, and Entley snorted. "My fish. You can't have any." A moment later, the image was amended to have 5 golden pips in the bottom left corner. Damn straight, it's legendary. "You still can't have any." "My fish." The capsule's screen flashed a green checkmark before going silent again. Entley was left comfortably alone with her snack and music until the larger screen across the hall turned on with a blip. She raised an eyebrow, which wasn't a natural expression for Enkar, but had been one of many humanisms everyone, whose anatomy allowed, had adopted. The culture crack of council space had been that complete. Even with humanity gone for 40,000 years, everyone still tried to imitate them a bit. Their ruins, their media, and sadly even some of their weapons, were everywhere. Besides, it made sense to do her best to be polite to the very human intelligence that ran the bronze cog. Entley have a happy squeak when she saw the face of the eternal captain. His avatar wore a worn, high-necked sweater, and his grey hair and beard that had been allowed to grow a bit wild. Still, once one got used to reading human faces, the captain was rather gentle-looking for a human. Of course, the robust EVI only had so much attention, and he was often directing various repairs according to the rules he had to work by or conversing with others. There were probably a handful of tourist groups being personally guided by the captain's avatar and eating up his immediate processing queue. So she waited until the face went from a standard animated loop, and then came alive. "Ah, there you. Jar crew member Natalie, Entley Olanta. Apologies for dipping in, but the personnel computer wanted me to check in on you. It seems it flagged you for not having taken shore leave in nearly 3 T-standard years." "That is correct." The Nakar shrugged, making her fur shimmer like stars with the movement. "Got no one down there that I'm really interested in visiting. Not since Dad died in a storm a few years ago." The captain stared out of the screen for nearly a moment before he became alive again. He was listening, just slow. "Not even your maternal parent?" "Mom has plans for me that I really do not agree with. We fight because I have my own desires and plans. Besides, the engineers just finished building that awesome variable G water park that one of the Icarus systems designed. I'd much rather spend my free time there." "I see. Honestly, if it were possible, I'd like to make the bronze cog my home, but I cannot honor that request." Entley blinked as the Eternal Captain responded fast enough to actually cut her off. "You're not the first, nor will you be the last. But to make you a permanent resident, you need to be registered as a player, and I cannot register new players outside of extreme circumstances." Along Fish Yard's hyper-limit, a priority message torpedo came screaming in. The navigation system had cut its translation too fine, and the FTL shear tore it apart as it crossed the wall, destroying it and its information. Thankfully, it wasn't. The only one carrying its message 2 minutes later, another appeared. Then another, and another. All screaming the same message on every priority channel. Code Zulu 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 Margite incursion and force repeat. Code Zulu Zulu Zulu. Every torpedo had different headers for different ships. Some had headers for different navigational paths. Others had data dumps from different battles, but they hit the Fish Yard system in force. Many of them broadcast a few times, registered other torpedoes racing in with similar messages, and their limited electronic brains decided to continue sending the alarm further into Confederate systems. This was a message that everyone had to hear. The Margite were here. They were here in numbers never seen before, and the Confederate Navy was taking horrible losses with every engagement. "But Captain, you keep saying you need players," Entley protested. She knew she wasn't going to win this argument, but she still felt compelled to try. "I do, but I cannot register new players. I need them, but I cannot add full player accounts." "But I don't understand. Why don't you contact Bobco?" "Because I am not a Bobco product." Nelty froze for a second in shock. "You're not? I thought everything was connected to Bobco in some way?" "No, I'm Nebula Steam. The two corporations work together a lot, but they are separate." "And you cannot contact Nebula Steam?" "I have. Many times. Unfortunately, my programming, and worse, the legal contracts are very clear. My registry system is bound to a specific data center on betrayed Mercury. Until the bag opens, and Terrasol returns, I cannot register full players." The captain finished explaining. "Honestly, I'm honored you'd be willing to serve aboard as a player. I am every time someone offers. But my hands are simply tied, and I am required to remind you that the most I can extend my free trial routines to anyone is 5 T-standard. Years." Entley sighed as she finished up her fish jerky before shoving the wrapper into another pocket. Yes, there were trash receptacles in this section of the bronze cog, but since this area was only rarely visited by organics, they tended to clog up when used, which would lead to having to take work parties from more critical systems to unclog it. Don't worry. You still have 2 more T-years before my programming will have to insist on you leaving. You don't have to take your leave off of the ship if you wish to stay, and your free trial pauses while you're on leave, so you can enjoy all that saved up time off in that water park or other recreation facilities if you desire." The captain looked like he was about to say more, but then paused when Pioneer 1829 leaned around the corner, now wearing a new helmet and overalls, and waved happily to let Entley know it was done. "Anyways, I'll let you get back to your Zulu." Zulantli's dark fur stood on edge as suddenly alarms across the ship started to scream as the lights turned red. The 4 engineer capsules around the end car popped open as the robots inside stepped out while drawing Magic's sidearms. Well, 3 did. One had its knee collapse in a shower of sparks and fell with a frustrated cry of, "Gleba!" Desperate for. Guidance Natli looked to the screen with the captain only to find his avatar had changed. It was the same face, but hardened and angry, and the high-necked sweater had been replaced by a crimson peacoat with golden highlights. On his head sat a similarly colored captain's hat with the terror runes Koi on it, and to finish the change, his messy hair and beard were suddenly neatly trimmed. Pioneer 1829, your entire landing pod equipment loadout should be a build gun and a zapper. Yet here you stand holding a basher, the captain snapped, and Nali looked up with a start to see that in the commotion the Pioneer-class robot had moved to loom over her. It was now wielding a massive weapon that crackled with electricity, ready to defend the small car, and she saw the Pioneer casually flip the Eternal Captain off, who gave a snort. "Might as well keep it, Pioneer." The captain paused to take a deep breath. "Crew member free trial grade class the 3rd, Ently Olanta. It is with deep regret that I have to inform you that your wish can now be granted. An emergency has presented itself that allows me to override my need for an external registry server. In the face of an impending mass casualty event, I am able to extend lifetime player status to those who are willing to be deputized." Ently looked around. The lights were still red, even though the alarms were being silenced. One of the engineer robots was standing by her, while 2 others helped the one with the bad leg. Is this some sort of a joke or a story event? If it is, apologies for breaking character, but it seems like you're kind of going overboard for this. I admit, this is the sort of pageantry and drama that make my writing servers tingle in excitement. Unfortunately, this situation is deadly serious. The Margite have returned. "Margite?" Ently gasped, her eyes wide as she trembled. "With fear. Yes, several naval message torpedoes just entered our system. Every single one of them is warning of Margite incursions." The captain's image moved to the corner of the screen as clips from the message torpedoes appeared showing Margite clusters. A few showed snippets of shipboard combat against the invasive starfish. "It is with sadness that I estimate a minimum of 3/4 of these torpedoes are displaying the last messages of dead sailors. Even as we speak, more and more torpedoes are arriving. That's horrible. Indeed. I missed the previous rounds of Margite troubles by being knocked out by the Shade Knight. However, I was created within living memory of the first Margite invasion. As such, my programming demands I contribute to the war effort." "And how will you do that?" Ently gasped, swallowing nervously as she looked at the Pioneer and engineers. "By destroying this system." The Eternal Captain stared into Ently's eyes. She stood there, utterly speechless in shock at the admission while new information appeared behind the captain. "Fish-Yard is too close to the front lines. It is not a question of if the Margite reach your home, but when. My current read of the situation is that they will be here within a standard T-year. In that time, I am able to contribute 3 things to the war effort. First of all, I can create the lift capacity to evacuate those that, for whatever reason, cannot or will not fight. I cannot save Fish-Yard, but I can save its people. Secondly, I can use this system's supplies to create a naval base to resupply, rearm, and repair any Confederate naval ships that arrive here. With any luck, that will help generate more time for both the first goal and the third. The last goal being to turn this system into a massive Margite blender. I cannot guarantee that I will prevent the Margite for taking this system, but I can turn Fish-Yard into a bulwark that will slow and weaken any further attacks down this line of advance, saving potentially billions of lives." The Eternal Captain took a long breath to steady himself. "But to do so, I will have no choice but to destroy your beautiful home." Ently stared at the screen, stared at the captain, blinking furiously as tears ran down her face. "But my mother, my family, my family's friends, and their families and friends. The best I can do is to get them out of the immediate path of the invasion. And me? I know you're one of the great builder's artifacts, but if you can do that all on your own, what do you need me for? That's the thing, I can't really do it on my own. I can try, but the Bronze Cog was the seed ship of a live-action role-playing server system. Much of my technology, much of my power is locked behind the need to have players unlock it. I need players to build the tools to progress through the tech trees, to build the tools to build the terrible weapons that have a chance of holding the Margite at bay. You want me to fight? No. The Inkar do not have the disposition for direct combat outside of immediate self-defense. I'm going to be honest with you. If you were to fight a Margite one-on-one, you would die a slow, painful, horrible death as it ate you alive. I do not need you to fight. I can build fighters. No, I need builders. I need researchers, laborers, factory designers, logistics pilots. And you, Entley Alanta, as a veteran player, would be an excellent onboarding trainer for new players. But that is only my plan for you. I will not force you to do this. There is no shame in running from the Margite. Entley stood there, hyperventilating as tears poured down her face while she tried to process this. She imagined a starfish landing on her mother's head and biting it off even as she screamed. She imagined the Bronze Cog devouring Twilight Harbor like the terrifying palms of old. She looked at the screen and saw plans for orbital gun platforms over every planet in the Fish Yard system, in the hundreds to thousands of miles long, and imagined those opening up on the invading Margite. With a sniffle, Entley stood at attention and gave her best salute. I accept the promotion to full player status.